All right, welcome to Civics Ain't Dead. I'm Josh, here with my friend Johnny, and tonight we're going to talk about something we haven't talked about before, which is this guy named Donald Trump. So, we have heard through the grapevine from family and friends that people think we're negative and that we may or may not have this thing called Trump derangement syndrome. Which has been making the rounds on through the media as a way to rationalize and explain this hysteria that we have about this one man and our hatred for him. And so I was thinking with Johnny, we just had an episode on kind of the current state of the GOP and what we call the corrupt bargain that a lot of Republicans have made to gain power vis-a-vis Trump and his resurgence to power in 2024 with the election. And we thought maybe this is a good time to spend a little bit of time talking about Trump himself and what does Trump gain from being back in the White House for a second time, and also more broadly, why do we hate him so much? And hate is a strong word. But I think it applies here, at least just speaking for myself.
I wouldn't use hate's not the first word that comes to mind. I think despise is a better word. I don't hate him, but I just despise what he stands for. Anyway, we're going to get into this.
Yeah, you've doubled the syllables on your word choice. Good job.
I have, yeah.
I mean, the more insidious accusation behind the idea that we have Trump derangement syndrome is that a lot of times, coupled with that, is that we're somehow rooting for America to fail, or we're rooting for Trump to fail first
rooting
of all, and then
America, yeah.
Because of that, we're rooting against America, and that to me flies completely in the face of what we're doing, what we stand for, and what we believe. We're certainly rooting for America every step of the way. We want America to be the best version of itself. We want to have as much opportunity and wealth and equality for as many people as possible to live their own version of the American dream, whatever that might mean to different people. What we see with Trump is that not happening. I think we see with Trump a guy who's in it for himself and seeking to do a couple things. One, profit off the White House, and also, honestly, stay out of jail. So there's this real disconnect, I think, between people who accuse us of having Trump derangement syndrome and what we see ourselves doing, which is resisting someone who really, in our minds, does not have America in his best interests. He has himself in his best interest, and that is very much at odds with what would be good for the majority of the American population. So I'll just start there.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah. I mean, the reason I find Trump despicable is not because I hate the guy personally, right? I've never met the guy. It's that I despise the fact that he undermines what I see as American values and principles. I'm a patriot. I love America, right? I want America, like you said, to live up to its values. And if someone is actively and aggressively undercutting those values, yeah, I despise that person, okay? Especially when it's someone who's in power, who has supposedly sworn to uphold those values, and yet seems to be actively undermining them or undercutting them. So, yeah.
And a big part of this is that we're told constantly to calm down, right? I mean, we did start a podcast, kind of the most cliche thing you can do in the 2020s. We're aware, right?
Take ourselves that seriously.
Right.
Hopefully everyone knows that.
hopefully all the 7 viewers watching this still um, know in their heart of hearts that we are not taking ourselves too seriously. But the idea that we need to calm down, it's such an easy thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it says more about the person telling us that than it does us, right? I mean, the common retorts we get are, it couldn't possibly be that bad. I think a lot of people who are just kind of marginally paying attention, turn on the news from time to time, see a headline or two, they think, at least in America, it couldn't possibly be that bad. Um,
Yeah. Or they just chalk it. Well, that's just Trump being Trump. It'll calm down.
and
It'll
I've
blow
heard
over.
we have a system of checks and balances. If it ever got that bad, we have a system of checks and balances. Did you not learn that in high school government, Josh? So I mean, we've talked about the authoritarian underpinnings of a lot of what's going on and why that scares us. Um, but that really is fueling a lot of this, what is called, Trump derangement syndrome, that people are freaking out. I think it's safe to say I'm freaking out, maybe on a daily basis. I mean, I'm still waking up and living my life and laughing and stuff with my kids, but it's also a scary time. And
It. I'll say, yeah. It's scary. It's worth freaking out over. It's also just depressing, right? Like, and maybe I'm naive, right? For 30 some years of my life, I've grown up thinking that America was the best answer to, you know, representative government, to equal rights, to human rights, to equality, or some vision of that, at least, right? Maybe we don't always live up to those values, but we're aspiring to them, and we're the closest humanity has gotten to them. Um, and as a historian and as like someone who's tuned into the world, I know we have shortcomings, but I also can't think of countries that until recently um, didn't also have some shortcomings like that. And so it's depressing for me to wake up for the first prolonged period of my life. And again, this maybe shows naivety, but wake up and think, gosh, America's doing this. Gosh, America's doing that, right? Like, we're living in a country now where masked armed men are rounding up people on streets and no one's blinking about it, right? Or saying much at all about deploying troops to civilian, metropolitan spaces, and rounding up homeless people at the point of a gun. I mean, that those are just a few like newsworthy points, but it is depressing to me to wake up as an American patriot and someone who has taken great pride in democracy and representative government and America's history. Right, we're both historians. I teach American history, but to start to kind of have that foundational confidence shook by current events is a weird mental place to be, I think. Um, and so call it Trump derangement syndrome if you want to. I call it tyrant derangement syndrome. But uh, I think the people that are deranged are the people that think that this is normal, right?
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, again, though, yes, I think people who are saying it's normal are deranged. I think there's also a lot of MAGA supporters who understand it's not normal, but view it in a more positive light, as like this is a break from the past, at least of the past
Well,
half
yeah,
century.
I've seen this on social media. Like, I voted for this, right? Like, saying that about the really weird stuff that's happening. Uh,
Yeah. And I mean, I see that as the fact that it's not normal. You can be depressed about it and be cynical about it, but also you can be optimistic and say, this is an opportunity to fight for what we believe America should be
Wake
in the
up,
future.
yeah.
If there's going to be some sort of reset or restart or whatever with the next elections, God willing, that can be exciting and uh, energizing as well
Yeah,
as depressing.
right. Yeah.
Um, so again, we've been personally told in various ways, we're not rooting for America. We're possibly un-American, even for doing this podcast. Um, Johnny, you've studied American history extensively. You know a lot about early American history. Like, would you say that throughout American history, it's been a requirement to support presidents kind of carte blanche?
No, definitely not. Right? Like I think it's totally acceptable to say you're a patriot, you're pro-American, or even you're skeptical about America, right, and its shortcomings. And that doesn't make you anti-American, doesn't make you a non-patriot, and it certainly doesn't make you not a patriot to root against a president or to actively, engage and push back against a presidency, right? I mean, yeah, there is this idea that, well, you've got to root for the president to succeed because that's like rooting for America. First of all, I don't put my whole American patriotism into the body of any one man, right? I mean, that would be monarchy, and I'm not a monarchist. The state and the person of our leader are two very different things, right? We, the people, as the Constitution said, we're the body politic here, right? We're the nation. Okay, so who the president is shouldn't actually matter that much. But I'm old school like that. But there's plenty of precedent where you can look back through American history and say, well, rooting for the president doesn't make any sense. Actually, you wouldn't root. I don't think, right? If you say you always got to support the president, well, there's lots of presidents I disagree policy wise on in history, right? When Andrew Jackson pushes through Indian removal, I don't think most people, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, as long as you're on the right moral spectrum, you wouldn't say, yeah, I hope Andrew Jackson succeeds at Indian removal, right? Looking back in hindsight. Now, at the time, it was actually a popular policy, but looking back, we would say, no, we would hope that president didn't succeed at that particularly heinous moment in American history. You wouldn't root for FDR to round up innocent Asian Americans and put them in internment camps, right? You wouldn't root for Andrew Johnson to undermine Abraham Lincoln's, early efforts at Reconstruction in the South. There's plenty of times when you wouldn't want to root for a U.S. president, right? Maybe you don't want to root for Richard Nixon to get away with Watergate. Maybe you don't want to root for I mean, those are a couple examples. Harding, the Teapot Dome scandal. Presidents make mistakes. They're fallible people, just like the rest of us, and they don't. They're not a stand-in for the country. There's also plenty of good examples of good American patriots actively rooting against presidents, right? So you don't have to go too far to think through this as an example, right? Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. You'd be hard pressed to find anyone who would paint Thomas Jefferson as not an American patriot, not as someone who is rooting for America. But during John Adams's presidency, he described John Adams as a, quote, blind, bald, crippled, toothless man who is a hideous, hermaphroditic character with neither the force and fitness of a man nor the gentleness and sensibility of a woman. Jefferson was definitely not rooting for John Adams as president, right? And we can debate where we fall on the Federalist, anti-Federalist spectrum, and what Jefferson, critiqued about Adams and what Adams did as president. We can debate all those historical points. The point being, Thomas Jefferson, very pro-America, very anti-President Adams, right? During Andrew Jackson's administration, there was literally a group of senators and congressmen that formed what they call the anti-Jacksonian party, right? Like that's not like a policy disagreement. They were opposed to Jackson in their name. And this included people like Davy Crockett, who opposed Jackson because of Indian removal. Davy Crockett's a patriot, right? You ask anyone in Texas, they'll tell you Davy Crockett's a patriot. But it also included people like Daniel Webster, Henry Clay, John Quincy Adams, right? Like very prominent American patriots during the early national period. And that's just, that's early America. We can think of plenty 20th century examples of active patriots opposing individual presidents. So I think that it's, you know, that's a 2 minute claim that if you sit back and actually think through it beyond your 2 minutes of passionate accusation, you'd realize pretty quickly, yeah, I guess I'm not always rooting for the president in American history. And I guess I can still be a patriot when I root against a president or root against a presidential administration, um, or critique America in general, right? Like, um, you know, I I saw this juxtaposition of quotes recently. So Stephen Miller, who we all know is one of Trump's main advisors, was on Meet the Press or somewhere, and he said, the powers of the president will not be questioned. Um, that's quite a statement, right? A much more American, a much more patriotic statement comes from someone like Teddy Roosevelt, who said that to announce that there must be no criticism of a president or that we are to stand by the president right or wrong is not only unpatriotic and servile, but is morally treasonable to the American public, right? And if Teddy said it that well, I think we can leave it be there, that this is a long history of American patriotism in opposition to an individual president, right? Um, if you think that your loyalty to a one man equals patriotism, you got to go back to basic civics, which is why we're here, right? Civics ain't dead, and it's more relevant than ever.
Yeah, and I think there is this long history of heinous acts by presidents. There are those C-SPAN polls that get this bipartisan group of historians to come out and rank presidents, which is off the bat kind of a ridiculous premise, to rank them in one list. But generally speaking, you can find out, who are the people at the front of the line, your Washingtons, your Lincolns, your FDRs, your Eisenhowers, your Jeffersons, and who are the people at the back of the line, right? Your Buchanans, your Johnsons, your Franklin Pierces. It's way too early to put any of the last few presidents on there with any kind of historical credibility, right?
Sure, I have a
However,
submission for you.
however, I think what we would want to do with the remainder of this episode is lay out some of the basic reasons why I think we would say you don't need 100 years of time to develop the opinion that Trump would probably fall pretty far down on that list.
Yes.
Um, so we've kind of thought about some of the big umbrella topics in which we find what Trump's doing and what Trump has done over the past 10 years to be not only like morally despicable but kind of also criminally despicable, right?
Yeah, and
Or just criminal.
patriotically reprehensible, right? Like, yeah,
Yes. With the point being, to support these things would be unpatriotic,
yes,
and to resist against them and call for accountability and justice would be to be patriotic. I think that's our basic premise.
yeah, exactly.
Um, right. And the first of these kind of three umbrella topics is, the criminal behavior, going back to his first term and certainly campaigning in his first term, right? Um, the argument in defense of this is that most of these things are hoaxes, that
Right,
they're not
trumped
real.
up charges, right? That it's a witch hunt. I mean, this was
Yes.
certainly the rhetoric he used between 2020 and 2024 to kind of mount his comeback. That he was being unduly persecuted. There's a witch hunt from activist prosecutors in New York or in wherever, the DOJ, and that's so it's all a hoax.
Yes. Which is a stew, a discursive stew, not trying to sound overly academic, but a discursive stew in which fascism really, really ferments very well, right? If no one but dear leader can decide what is true and what's false, then we're there. We're in 1984 already.
Yeah.
If you want to just dismiss everything we go through and say it's all a hoax, it's all a witch hunt, he didn't do anything wrong, you can do that. But we wouldn't sit here and talk about this stuff if we didn't think it was serious.
And that might be a great example of a true DTS situation, right? Like, if you're able to overlook every tangible criminal accusation, not even necessarily just the ones he's been found guilty of, yeah, um, then you're living in a different reality.
Yeah. And again, one more disclaimer, like, this is there's no way to make this comprehensive.
No, no, this episode would be way too long if we went through all of the problems. But tell me about some of these crimes, Josh.
Yeah. So let me I got some, well, they're laundry lists of things. So let me just lay some of them out and then we'll go from there.
Josh is our real researcher for this podcast. If
No,
people haven't figured this out, Josh actually comes prepared with notes.
no, false, fake news. All right. So let's just start with the first term. What we would say are credible accusations of at least 48 criminal offenses while serving as president or campaigning for president prior to 2016. 13 counts, campaign finance crimes and cover up. 2 counts of the destruction of presidential records. 13 counts obstructing the Russia and special counsel investigations. 21 counts on attempting to steal the 2020 election. 2 counts on falsifying public financial disclosure reports. And 5 counts of bribery for attempting to get Ukraine to interfere in the 2020 election. If you recall, that's what led to the first impeachment
Mueller, yeah,
by the House. There's more, but I'm going to not even get into that. And again, just to recap, there was a moment where certainly the two of us, and I think a lot of people thought Trump was done in the interim between January 6th, 2021, and I don't know, maybe the year before this most recent election and the run up to it, when we realized, oh, like, no, he still has legs. Trump went through a series of 4 indictments, only one of which ended up getting resolved and resulting in the 34 felonies that he currently has as president, right?
mm-hmm.
Guilty on all counts, and that was the hush money payoff for
Stormy Daniels.
Stormy Daniels, days before the 2016 election. There was also the federal indictment on the classified document charges in Florida, where he was accused of not just keeping classified documents at Mar-a-Lago, but then developing a scheme to conceal that and not cooperate with the authorities in returning those things, right? Then you had the federal indictment in 2020 for the 2020 election interference case. His actions, which eventually led to January 6th, conspiracy to defraud the U.S. and so forth, just a little thing. And then you also have the state indictment for the 2020 election interference case for Fulton County, Georgia.
Georgia, right.
Which is where he's trying to, quote unquote, find 11,780 votes.
Yeah. And it was Republicans, we should remind everyone, it was Republicans in Georgia that actually held on to their character and said, no, we're not doing this, right? They didn't back down either at the state level with a Republican governor or at the county level with, just volunteer poll workers, good American citizens doing their civic duty there and not giving in to bullying and intimidation and everything else that came out of that.
Yeah. And that's to say nothing to Mike Pence, right? And his refusal to, play ball with Trump on certifying or refusing to certify the election. So that's term 1. Somehow it may have gotten worse. Now we're only, it's August 27th, right? So we're not even a full 8 months or
Yeah.
barely a full 7 months into Trump's second term. Um, and certainly there's less kind of uh, legal discourse on things that have been crimes that have been committed so far. But
Hmm.
just going through, let's say, like the first 5 months, there's plenty to talk about, as we've been talking about in other episodes. But here are some what many scholars and lawyers would say are potentially impeachable offenses right off the bat in just the first 5 months. Okay, unlawful mobilization of military forces against civilian protesters in the United States, illegally and unconstitutionally kidnapping and imprisoning U.S. residents without due process and in violation of their constitutional and statutory rights, unconstitutionally usurping Congress's power, defying court orders and usurping judicial authority, terminating DOJ and FBI officials based on retribution, largely for previous work on investigations into a lot of these past allegations that I
Right.
just mentioned. Co-opting and dismantling federal agencies for corrupt purposes, that would be Doge. Unlawfully imposing tariffs, it's the role of Congress.
Right.
Receiving foreign and domestic emoluments, the 400 million Qatari jet is just one of them, which is a great business deal according to him, right? Improperly using emergency and wartime powers.
Yeah.
The use of the quote unquote national emergency and invasion language to describe what's going on along the southern border, just as one example. Abusing the pardon power, all of those insurrectionists that he incited in January 6th. First day in office, pardoned.
Pardoned. Yeah.
Blanket pardons. Moving on, depriving citizens of their birthright citizenship, guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. I mean, that's ongoing. And impeding and obstruction efforts to secure United States elections and protect against cyber attacks. That's a topic for another episode. But the point is, many, if not all of these, are on their own impeachable offenses that if anyone else had committed, Fox News would be having an aneurysm. But if you consider the fact that this is just about 5 months of evidence, and you take all of them together,
I know.
uh, again, it doesn't feel like hyperbole to say like democracy is at stake right
Yeah.
now.
Well, and I would just point out, right, this because this is the criminal category of why we root against Donald Trump, right? And the gamut that this runs is everywhere from what you could argue are political things, right? Like he ran on being hard on immigration and now he's denying birthright citizenship. That's just a policy difference, right? Like you could maybe, if you had, you know, if you had drank enough Kool-Aid, you could say, well, that's just, you're critiquing his policies. But it runs the gamut from those types of kind of politicized indictments or impeachable offenses all the way down to like, yeah, he slept with you know, a porn star and then paid her illegal hush money from campaign finances, right? And so like the seediest crime you can think of to like the most nefarious authoritarian crime you can think of, he really runs the gamut, right? Everywhere in between to like misplacing classified documents and then lying about it or whatever, right? All of these different things that you just laid out. Um, he's not a one-trick pony when it comes to crime, and that's notable. Richard Nixon, the best, probably the best comparable example in the presidential office in modern times. Famously left office, resigned with the words "I'm not a crook," right? Clearly he had committed espionage against a political opponent, right? Um, but that might have been Nixon's only domestic criminal offense, let's say, right? I mean, he was not wheeling and dealing on this full spectrum of criminal activity. He wasn't a crook, right? Like he was not a a professional crook the way Donald Trump absolutely, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, you have to admit that your man's a crook. Maybe you like him, because he's a crook, but he's as crooked as they come, um, and as criminal as you could imagine someone sitting in the White House being.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say Nixon. I think Watergate did expose a deeper sense of corruption with Nixon that played out in different ways, but certainly we're talking about two different ballparks here. Maybe Watergate is the moment in American history which lays the foundation for someone like Trump to come along and just govern with impunity. I don't know. Um,
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like a bad mashup of Warren Harding and Richard Nixon, right? Like he's power hungry like Nixon and paranoid like Nixon. He's also like sloppy and corrupt like Warren Harding, right? So he's some bad, I don't know, mashup of the two, which gets us into the next category, which is this corruption stuff, right? Because it's not, yes, it's the criminal stuff, but there's more than just the normal criminal stuff to Trump's corruption. Um, you know, I would, I mean, you can read estimates about how much money his family has accumulated over the course of these two presidencies now. And that's not normal either, right? Like most presidents do not get rich quick by becoming president and brokering all of these um, personally aggrandizing deals. And I would just point out that, even in Trump's first term, he broke all kinds of presidential precedents in where he, either punted or outright refused to divest from his companies. Most presidents, when they become president, they put their property into a trust so they don't touch it again until after they've left office, so that their personal business interests don't interfere with presidential business or the interests of the country. Um, you know, Trump was supposed to release his tax returns way back in 2016. He never did. He was the first modern president to not do so since the Nixon administration. And so there's that, you know, precedent of anti-corruption that he broke immediately in 2016, and we've kind of just gotten numb to that when it comes to Trump now. And this second administration, the second term, he's really just kind of full on embraced the grift of accepting, bribes from foreign countries, blatantly, like that jet. Um, you know, Not making any bones about his personal trips to Scotland to, see his new course open at the same time he's promoting different, bitcoins or cryptocurrencies or whatever, right? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. I'm sure you have better examples than I'm coming up with, Josh, but
no, I mean, I think those are a lot of the big ones. You see a lot of Middle Eastern countries and their leaders investing in these cryptocurrency schemes. Um, the one other golf related example I have is in Vietnam, where you see a direct, well, there seems to be a direct correlation between the reduction in tariffs on Vietnamese exports and the fact that Trump also just so happens to be building what I think is going to be his largest per square mile golf course in that country. So I mean, and but this goes back to you start with the Jared Kushner story with getting the Saudis to invest 2 billion in I think his private equity firm, which was starting up at the time. Um, there's all kinds of kind of foreign entanglements, which are like right off the bat so sketchy and so skeevy and so like such a red flag
yeah,
that if it was anyone else, it'd be. I mean, we've heard about Hunter Biden's laptop, which, to my knowledge, has no incriminating evidence on Joe Biden when he was president or vice president um, involved with any of this. Now, Hunter
yeah.
Biden's a different story, but you see how quick the right wing media would latch onto something as just like a laptop. Where is the accountability for Trump? There's a New Yorker journalist named David Kirkpatrick who has attempted recently to provide an estimate for how much money the Trump family has gained while in office. Um,
Yeah.
it's a good article. I think it's a work in progress. They published a version of the article, and he's still, I think, refining it and tweaking the numbers. But his premise is like, if Trump's business dealings were in any way, shape, or form in process prior to his political career, that money and that revenue is not counted in his sum.
Hmm.
His current sum of Trump profiting off the White House is $3.4 billion.
Crazy. Yeah.
And again, like, who knows? Maybe another person would come up with 2.5 billion, and another person would come up with
Right.
4.8. The point
Point
is,
is, it's a lot of money. Yeah.
it's billions of dollars,
Yeah.
right? And it's not like the merchandise. There's a whole other story of the merchandise with the Trump store and the fact that a lot of people are buying "Make America Great Again" hats, thinking they're donating to his campaign, when in fact they're not. They're just paying him personally that money. It's really obscure, that issue. But this guy Kirkpatrick puts the merchandise sales, the Bibles, the watches, the perfume, the whatever,
Yeah.
at like $20 million of revenue. So that's a drop in the bucket
Yeah.
compared to a lot of these other investments, which are foreign governments and
Yeah.
the leaders of foreign governments
Yeah.
making deals with him personally. Um,
Yes.
it's, I guess, by by the letter of the law, I guess, as long as they disclose it, it's legal. But it's about as unethical
Yeah.
as one could describe.
Well, and I don't know that I'd give the benefit of the doubt that everything's being disclosed either, right? I mean, this is a guy who has consistently refused to show his tax returns, consistently refused to show his books, um, unless required to by a court, and and some of the accusations and criminal charges against Trump have been um, either overinflating values, underinflating values of his property. So I don't think clean bookkeeping is necessarily what you should expect from this either. So it, yeah, I I'm trying to think about a defense if I was to play devil's advocate or set this up as a straw man to knock down. And I guess that the defense to this is, well, they all get rich. All those congressmen, inside trade. Look at Nancy Pelosi's portfolio. The scale at which Donald Trump is doing this is not like anyone else in Congress. Yes, Obama charges high speaker fees. Yes, Bill Clinton has the Clinton Foundation. Yes, there's a lot of money moving around at the top elite levels of politics. But Trump is blatantly greasing his wheels from his position of power, and I don't think anyone who's looking at it can unsee that, right? It's just a matter of, I guess, normalizing it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say two things. I think the Nancy Pelosi camp and the Obama and Clinton camp are two different things. I don't see why anyone would have any problem with a president after they've left office, making money. And certainly every president, I think, except for Biden, really, because, well, he's old and he's only been out of office for a year or so. Um, every recent president in modern memory has made a lot of money after
Yeah,
office
right.
with
They,
speaker fees and
they
so forth.
write books. All that stuff.
And their notoriety and their fame is much higher than it was before they became president. That's just a fact of the way it goes, I think. And I think that's like good for them. The Nancy Pelosi camp, like, no, we're not Nancy Pelosi fans.
No,
Like, any politician who's playing the stock market with any sort of insider knowledge, like, that should be investigated. And I think,
should be,
generally speaking, any
yes,
congressperson
illegal.
playing the stock market, like that should be something that as a country we should all collectively agree is not cool. But if you're gonna for a second criticize Nancy Pelosi of anything, then you better have Donald Trump even higher up, because again, like anything Nancy Pelosi has done,
Right.
unethically, illegally, whatever,
Yeah, it's
Trump is,
percentages to Trump's billions. Yeah.
yeah, which is our point, because we've heard, a million times in one how much Nancy Pelosi sucks, and yeah, we agree, but like again, the scale, the scale. So that's a bit. I mean, we talk about the crimes, we talk about the corruption and the personal profiting. Perhaps the most heinous thing, uh, the elephant in the room, that we'd really want to talk about briefly, um, is Trump as a sexual predator, right? And his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Um, Now, there's no shortage of other talking heads on YouTube who know way more about this than we do. So we're not going to spend 2 hours going down the rabbit holes as
we're we're playing catch up on this whole conspiracy theory thing. So, so that's
yeah. Well, and this is the conspiracy theory that conspiracy theorists use as a gateway into other conspiracy theories. They say, "See, we told you Epstein was right. That
yeah.
this all Epstein stuff was true, and therefore, the Earth's flat." Um, so we don't need to get into the rabbit holes, but I do have some questions, right, that I think people want to know. The first one I'll pose to you. Actually, I'll pose the first two questions at the same time.
Okay.
The first is, why didn't the Democrats release the files? When they were, why didn't Joe Biden release the files when he was in office? And
Yeah.
piggybacking off that, why has Epstein resurfaced now? The guy died,
Yeah.
um, in 2019
During Trump's first term. Yeah.
during Trump's first term, and honestly, there's little new information that we currently have that wasn't already known back then as well. So why now?
Yeah. Well, so why now? I think this maybe if I answer the first question, we can get into the second question. But why now? I think is because this was a MAGA talking point during the campaign, right? Like Trump famously came out and said he was going to release all the JFK files. He was going to release all the Martin Luther King Jr. files on those assassinations, and more reluctantly, I think, said, "Yeah, sure, I'll release the Epstein stuff too." Right, but then MAGA faithful took that and ran with it, because there are many people in the MAGA camp that are convinced that there is this elite, you know, circle of sexual predators that either run the country or are quite powerful within the country. Um, we're not going to get into all that crazy stuff, the QAnon stuff. That is a separate separate episode that I don't want to do anytime soon. But this idea, right, that there is this elite cabal um, of sexual predators that are running things and covering it up. Epstein fits into that because he very much is, a groomer for elite sexual and underage sexual um, liaisons, right? And that's why he was in jail. Um, so he was sex trafficking young girls to elite people. And so it fits with that QAnon suspicion, and it fits with this kind of MAGA anti-elite vibe. And so Donald Trump was happy to kind of run on part of that in his platform for 2024. And of course, Pam Bondi, right, his attorney general, says she's got the client list. This was back in February. She claimed she had the book, she had the client list on her desk, and she just needed to review it and release it. Now the tune changed. Late this spring, I think she informed Trump that his name was in the files in some form. And again, we don't know what that means. Um, But quite quickly, they did kind of an about face. There's all these reports of FBI people um, combing through the files to try to scrub Donald Trump's from them.
Yeah,
Uh,
like a thousand agents or
yeah,
something like that,
yeah. It
just
almost seems
scouring the files.
unbelievable. Yeah, but supposedly, right, this happened. And then by July, Pam Bondi comes out and says, yeah, there is no Epstein list. There's no files to release, which was a real blow to anyone in the MAGA movement thinking that Trump was going to bring a reckoning against this elite pedophilia ring. Um, so I think that's why it's resurfaced, right? And it's why Trump is now, you know, he kind of goes back and forth between presenting as a little panicky about it and then just presenting as kind of bullish and angry about it, right? That this is a hoax brought on by the Democrats and they've cooked the books or whatever. So I think that's why it's resurfaced. I don't know if it's going to go away or not. The momentum seems to have dulled since July. At least I haven't followed it that closely, but it doesn't seem to be a prescient talking point, at least among Trump's base, like it was a month ago. Um, and so I don't know if that means it's going to die off. I guess one big question that I have about Epstein and whether or not this continues to be a thorn in Trump's side is what the Republicans in Congress do with it when they come back from recess in September here. But uh, the other question is, I don't know why the Democrats didn't release the files. Probably it's some. I mean, you maybe have more specific theories. I suspect that either there's not that much there. Um, there's not a whole lot of new information, like you say, since 2019, and maybe there isn't a whole lot of information to comb through. I also think that Joe Biden, for all his faults, believed in things like presidential precedents. And so there's been a long precedent, as we talked about last episode, actually, of presidents looking the other way on their predecessors' misdeeds and not choosing to go after them for things. You know, if Trump was in those files, he probably wasn't explicitly. I mean, maybe he was. I don't know. Explicitly a patron. Um, but even if he was, I'm not sure that Joe Biden would have released that kind of information because he's playing from an older, playbook where politics is polite and you don't just totally trash your predecessor as someone like a sexual predator. Um, Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if I have a good theory about this. What do you think?
Yeah, man, I think we might have different views on this. I don't know. The above the fray argument I do buy for a lot of things. With Epstein, I mean, there's a couple things to say. One is that there are a lot of people involved. There might be ongoing investigations that, you know, quote unquote, releasing the files would compromise
Undermine, yeah.
and undermine, and there's possibly something at play there, not related to Trump, but just in general, getting information on other people involved that they don't want to get all that information out there. I mean, certainly the victims they don't want to
Yeah.
put in the limelight, but I mean, we don't know like the extent of the people involved and who's involved, and certainly, I think Trump's in the files. We know that. I mean, his own attorney
His
general
own
has said
people
that,
say that, yeah.
but there's a lot of other people in it too. So it's probably sensitive in a number of different ways. The other thing is that they were sealed under court order um, under Biden's administration, and the Supreme Court uh, twice extended the appeal deadline, which conveniently kept it until right after the election.
Interesting.
Um, so that incriminating evidence, if it exists, was in limbo until Trump took office and could play this card that he was going to release it. Um, the other thing is, if you're the Biden administration and you release anything, do you think MAG is going to believe it?
Right, that's a good point. Yeah. Will it do you any good as Joe Biden, let's say July of 2024, right, to release something about Epstein and Trump? Or is it just going to look like a smear campaign and get dismissed as fake news? Because so many things that are real have been dismissed as fake news when it comes to Donald Trump.
And so, there's such an interesting ebb and flow of, I mean, this is more a question for the media and journalism, but like the ebb and flow of like covering things too much, let's say with Hillary's emails, for example, in 2016, which may have sank her campaign and
Yeah.
gotten Trump in office in the first place.
Yeah.
And then backing off, and then the Hunter Biden laptop story starts, and everyone's kind of like, let's not even go there. This seems fishy. The
Yeah.
timing of it seems fishy.
Right.
Turns out that it was really his
real.
laptop.
Yeah.
Is Joe Biden incriminated in any way? No, but it was a real story that should have been covered much more extensively up front. And so it's tough to stay. It's tough to say with Epstein, like what certainly the government, from a legal standpoint, can do or wants to do or get involved with, and then with media and journalism coverage of it. It really takes off, I think, this summer because of MAGA pushback.
Yeah.
Ironically.
Yeah.
It's like
there was a betrayal, right? Like there was a feeling of betrayal. Donald Trump is going to, knock heads and get these elites in order and call out pedophilia. And then he says there's nothing there, right? And so there's an emotional component that like, well, wait a minute. You promised us this, right? So,
yeah.
Well, and it doesn't help that there is so much smoke where there is fire here, right? So it's hard even for the most devout Trump apologist to ignore all the pictures, all the... I mean, by Trump's own admission, he was buddies with the guy until 2004, right? And they were close. I mean, we have pictures of them on planes together. We have, supposedly this birthday card that Trump signed for Epstein. Epstein introduced Trump to Melania, maybe, right? Like, there's no question they were close. And then, Trump this summer saying, well, the only reason they had a falling out is because Trump knew he was stealing his young workers. I mean, and this is not like spin. This is just like stuff Trump has said.
Yeah. I mean, a common recurring realization we're having is that when Trump says something, he's saying it for real. Like, we're not inferring this relationship here. Like, he'll hang himself and then watch as no one gives a shit.
Yeah.
I mean, the friendship with Epstein is indisputable, right? 2002, Trump tells New York Magazine that I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. Right? I mean, you mentioned this birthday card.
Yeah.
May every day be another wonderful secret. We have certain things in common, Jeffrey. And then Epstein, in his interview with Michael Wolff, this biographer of Trump who had access in his first administration,
right?
Epstein says, I was Donald's closest friend for 10 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And Epstein in that interview has
no reason.
All this.
Yeah.
Well, he has no reason to lie, first of all, and except that he might be killed in his prison. But we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. He's talking about the ins and outs of Trump's sex life. He's also talking about the ins and outs of Trump's first administration. Like, it's clear they were still
close.
Very frequent communication, even as Trump was president, up until Epstein dies in his prison cell in 2019. So the friendship is, I think, indisputable and seems to run longer than Trump claims. I mean, there's a number of ways to get into this. One thing to mention is that we have to at least acknowledge Trump's kind of history of sexual assault allegations is much longer and much deeper than just his association with Epstein.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly we got the Stormy Daniels story we've covered, but here's a quick Good.
Well, I would say we've got the Hollywood Access tape from way early on, and that's no doctored tape, right? Like I think anyone who listens to that knows that's Trump talking, and he's talking about grabbing women without permission, right? To put it mildly, he'd put it more graphically. All of the MAGA Christians should listen to it, but you've got other ones too, right?
Plenty. Um, so this list is compiled by PBS News. I wonder what Trump thinks about PBS. Um, so this list is just of women who have not disavowed their allegations. Right. So this is still a present list as far as I know. I'm just going to say the names, read the basic dates in which the accusations happen. But these are all sexual assault allegations.
Against
Kristen
Trump,
Anderson,
yeah.
against Trump directly, yeah. Kristen Anderson, early 1990s. E. Jean Carroll, late 1995 or early 1996. A lot of people know about that one.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel Crooks, 2005. Jane Doe, aka Katie Johnson, 1994. That's the big one with uh, the accusation that Trump and Epstein together repeatedly raped this Katie Johnson woman in Epstein's New York City apartment in 1994 when she was 13. Jessica Drake, 2006. Joel Harth, 1992 to 93. Kathy Heller, 1997. Nini Loxonin, 2006. Jessica Leeds, early 1980s. Page 2. Mindy McGillivray, 2003. Jennifer Murphy, 2004. Cassandra Searles, 2013. Natasha Stoynoff, 2005. Temple Taggart McDowell, 1997. Karina Virginia, 1998. Summer Zervos, 2007. There's also teen pageant contestants alleging Trump walked in while they were dressing. These are Mariah Bellado and Victoria Hughes, also corroborated by 3 other anonymous sources from the 1997 Miss Teen USA pageant. So, anyways, again, maybe every single one of those women just made that up. Maybe. Or maybe not.
Doubtful, right? Yeah. Um, yes, yeah. It's a lot of accusations over a long time period. And again, not all associated with Epstein, right? The vast majority of them are outside of his relationship with Epstein. Um, so, yeah, you can choose to believe any one of these accusers, or all of them, or you can choose to believe Donald Trump, who's known for his honesty,
Right.
and his respect for women.
Right. Right. We've always known that. Like
Yeah.
the guy has not told over 30,000 lies just in his first term. He hasn't. The other thing, I promise this is the last laundry list, but the other thing that I think we have to just get out there in the ether is some of the, what I would say is concrete evidence, uh, or highly incriminating evidence that we have associating Trump with this trafficking ring that Epstein ran and Ghislaine Maxwell ran. It's actually not that much, but the Black Book is front and center. So I'm sure a lot of people have heard of the Black Book. Um, this is a list of contacts that Epstein had. It was stolen by Alfredo Rodriguez, the former house manager for Epstein, and then acquired by the FBI in a sting in which Rodriguez was attempting to sell it for like 50 grand or something. Um, so there's a bunch of names circled uh, in the book, including Trump's and all of his contact info, with the names being circled, apparently or allegedly being the ones who were involved directly in the trafficking ring of underage women.
this is the closest we actually have to a list as far as anyone has seen, right? I mean, it's
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. And again, you could say, well, maybe this guy who circled it, Alfredo, he's not trustworthy. And that's fair, right? Like,
yeah.
it's not a smoking gun by any means, but it's pretty close, I'd say.
Our old methods teacher used to tell us to triangulate your evidence. Okay, so we've got one corner of our triangle in place here.
Yeah. I mean, there's the flight logs. And again, I don't know how many. From what I understand, there's like 1% of the Epstein files released to the public or something
Yeah,
like that,
yeah.
between 1 and 3%.
Hmm.
Uh, so are there more flight logs? Yeah, I think probably. The flight logs that are released to the public, Trump's name appears 7 times um, on Epstein's plane. The other thing, the other big thing that I'll mention, and I'll leave it at that, is this testimony by this Jane Doe or this Katie Johnson, um, who's this woman who came forward and her story was that Trump and Epstein both uh, raped her as a 13-year-old in New York City. A lot of people think this is a hoax. You can see her testimony. Her face is blurred out, but you can listen to her testimony on YouTube. It's like 30 minutes or something. Um, and you can judge for yourself. There's also the court affidavit. It's awful stuff. We don't even need to get into it, but the lawsuit that this Katie Johnson woman had against Trump, she dropped in November of 2016, um, after reportedly receiving multiple threats. So again, Trump becomes president. He's a powerful guy to begin with. She drops the lawsuit. Uh, there's a lot to say there, and there's probably a lot unsaid by a lot of people on any one of these individual accusations. But I think Katie Johnson's probably is right at the top of like what people should be paying attention to if they want to get to the bottom of this.
Good insight, Josh. Yeah,
Yeah. So like, like there's more. There's always going to be more with this. Um, I've had a lot of people ask me like, well, what do you think? Like, is he on the Epstein list? Is he implicated? Um, I think the preponderance of the evidence,
yeah,
as we were taught to consider, uh, seems to point that way. And given his track record, given his social circles, the fact that he was, best friends with Epstein for at least a decade, if not more. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Given the fact that Pam Bondi has told him directly, "Hey, you're in these files," yeah. Given how he's been acting since this has resurfaced in 2025, yeah, you don't need to be a psychologist to look at that guy and see what's going on in his head.
yeah.
What does that mean practically? Will he ever be punished for it or held accountable? No, I don't think so.
Sure doesn't
Uh,
seem like it. Yeah,
but the two likeliest scenarios in which Trump was involved were that Epstein used his
pretty.
his properties, his pageant, his beauty pageant, as a source of finding underage women to traffic, and then he used Mar-a-Lago to traffic underage women. I mean, that's the story of Virginia Giuffre, right? Who
Right.
claimed, uh,
She
she
started.
was
Yeah,
a spa attendant at Mar-a-Lago when she was a teenager. She claimed Ghislaine Maxwell, kind of recruited her. Um, and then Virginia Giuffre died by suicide earlier this year. So it's heinous stuff.
it
I
should
don't know
make
how
your
you.
yeah it should make your skin crawl. And I think that that's why if you're still rooting for the president, if you're still in the pro-Trump camp, you probably don't want to dig too deep into this because it makes me uneasy, right? But it's shocking stuff, even if I'm not surprised that Trump's involved in it. Um, And you probably don't want to sit too long with the fact that you're supporting someone with this this level of depravity, morally, personally, politically, every category you can think of, right? Um,
Yeah, and I mean, I guess just to round it up, like the the biggest defense or the biggest retort I always get, and this goes back to day one of 2016 when he was talking about grabbing him by the pussy, and everyone's like, "Well, okay, what?" The retort from day one has been, "Yes, we can all agree he's a despicable man, but he's great for the country. This is what we need for the country. He's a great politician.
yeah,
He's a great businessman.
hold
He
your
gets stuff
nose and
done."
vote. Yeah, hold your nose and vote.
I mean, what do you make of that as a thought?
I will go back to some some Pauline wisdom here and say that a bad tree bears bad fruit, right? Like the guy has the guy is immoral, the guy is despicable, the guy has bad values. You can't root for someone like that. You can't root for um it's not just his personality, it's not just his vulgarity. He is rotten to the core, and he's he's infecting every fiber of American society with this depravity, right? Um, as our leader, he's a terrible example to young children, young men especially, right? That you can do this stuff and get away with it with no consequences. As a world leader, he represents no American value that I want people associating with my country. Um, and and he's an immoral, despicable figure who you wouldn't want to sit in a room with, let alone have your country run by, right? Do you An honest question to sit and reflect with, would you want your daughter in a room alone with Trump? And if the answer to that is no, then you should not want your country in a room alone with Trump. That's kind of where I sit, right? So, am I rooting for America? Yes, still rooting for America. Rooting for America to boot this loser out.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The guy is the Epstein stuff, as George Conway said, who's one of the founders of the Lincoln Project. A former Republican. George Conway said the Epstein stuff is of a piece. Like
Yeah, it's it's a
it's not
symptom
some
of the whole thing. Yeah.
it's not some shocking revelation that should bury him because no one saw it coming. It's really not that much different than anything else that
Yes,
he stands for or represents as the leader of the U.S. right now.
it should not be
Um,
surprising. Yeah.
right. I mean, the guy is a narcissistic sociopath. He completely lacks empathy. He's a pathological liar. He can't have a conversation without stumbling into a lie. He doesn't exist in the reality that the rest of us do. And we refuse as a country to hold him accountable for that. Um, if you can't see that his values are one and the same with his policies, you're not paying attention in my mind. And certainly other episodes of this podcast would do a better job at explaining why, despite the fact that he claims we're getting all this great tariff revenue and the American economy is as strong as it's ever been, why that's just a bald-faced lie. We can't sum all that up here, but like he claims we're winning. He claims America's great again. Um, we're not winning.
Yeah.
Right now, we're not. Um,
Paraphrase it, John Wayne movie. You shouldn't believe this guy's word that night's dark and day's light, right? Like, and I think that if you listen to your gut no matter who you are, again, no matter what side of the political spectrum, you got to know that. You got to know that this guy is just a grifter, an amoral one, right? Um, and you can't trust a word out of his face. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll leave it with one quotation, right? Um, and this quotation comes from one of the world's most notorious sex offenders, Jeffrey Epstein, who in his interview with Michael Wolff says of Donald Trump, quote, "The moral compass just does not exist." When Jeffrey Epstein, who's rotting in hell right now,
Yeah.
claims that your moral compass just doesn't exist, I think that sums it up.
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't got to take his word for it. Open your eyes and pay attention to what he's doing on a daily basis. The policies, the agenda, the random 3 a.m. tweets, insulting whatever talk show host he feels like. There is really nothing
No
that
redeeming
I've
quality.
seen.
No.
There's no policy, at least with the second term. I don't think I've seen a single thing, except maybe his insult of the new Cracker Barrel logo. I agree there. Um, other than Cracker Barrel, I don't think there's a single thing Trump has done that isn't either morally reprehensible or a bald-faced lie,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
which is morally reprehensible. You know,
Right.
that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that makes me deranged, happy to be it.
Yeah. Yes. Me too. That's a good note to end on a long episode here. So thanks for bearing with us, anyone
Yes.
listening. Either watching this in full or in part. Next time we'll touch base again. Maybe we'll recap kind of where we are. We'll take the temperature, Josh, of what things look like 7-8 months in. Does that sound? Yeah. Like
Sounds
okay,
good.
that's our plan. Just a recap of: is it as bad as you thought it was going to be? Is it worse? Or are there bright spots? I don't know. We're not ending on a bright spot tonight, though.
Well, I mean, Cracker Barrel did decide it's going back to its original logo. So the big culture war issues that really matter for America are back on track.
We keep winning. Yeah. Okay.
We keep winning.
Yeah.
All right. So relax,
right.
Johnny. Calm down.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Tweets.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Yeah.
Over and out.